Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe to keep me motivated to tell more interesting stories. Now let's get started. The fire started behind me. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. It literally started behind me in the kitchen while I was standing in the hallway holding a mug of tea that never made it to my lips. It was like the air itself cracked. A pop. Then a bloom of orange, so sudden it looked staged, as if a magician had snapped their fingers and summoned hell. I didn't think. Not like someone calmly planning their next steps in a commercial for insurance or smoke alarms. I didn't grab my laptop. I didn't search for my wallet. I didn't even call 911. I just ran. In my pajamas. With one slipper on. My phone was already in my hand because I was doom-scrolling Twitter, which in some perverse twist of fate probably saved my life. The air outside felt colder than it should have. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Maybe the contrast to the blistering hallway behind me. I didn't turn around. Not until I was standing at the edge of the yard where the grass met the gravel. My house, my little rental that I never quite got around to decorating was glowing, like a jack-o'-lantern left lit too long. The roof cracked with heat. The back window blew out with a sound I felt in my ribs. I remember thinking weirdly, well, there go my plants. There's something the documentaries never get right, the smell. You don't forget the smell of fire. Not clean wood smoke like a fireplace, not like camping. No real fire smells like plastic and memory. It smells like panic. Historical note, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Consumed over 3 square miles and left more than 100,000 people homeless. But historians still debate whether it really started in the barn of Mrs. O'Leary's cow or whether that was just a scapegoat for poor urban planning. Anyway, as I watched the fire swallow my house, I didn't think about the cause. I thought about the inside of my closet. A red hoodie I hadn't worn in years. A stack of old birthday cards I never reread but couldn't throw away. My passport. My only decent pair of jeans. All gone. Vapor. I backed away down the street, barefoot now. The slipper was somewhere back on the lawn, but I didn't go back for it. That slipper was made of foam and polyester anyway. It would have melted just like everything else. A neighbor I barely knew. A woman named Doreen, who always wore floral leggings and smoked menthols on her porch, came running out. "Are you okay?" she shouted, her face bright with panic. I nodded, though I wasn't. I was shaking, which is a polite word for vibrating like a washing machine on spin. Doreen didn't hug me, which I appreciated. Instead, she handed me her phone and said, "You should call someone." That someone turned out to be my sister, who answered on the second ring with a groggy, "Why are you calling at before?" I interrupted her with, "My house is on fire." There was a pause. Then she said, "Wait, like on fire? Like actual fire?" I remember answering, "No, metaphorical. Just thought I'd spice up your night." Weird fact, in 1666 during the Great Fire of London, people tried to save their belongings by throwing them in the River Thames. Spoiler alert, it did not work. I ended up sitting in Doreen's car with the heater blasting. The fire trucks came fast. Too fast for me to process the flashing lights or the barking commands or the way my front door crashed down with the weight of a fireman's boot. They ran hoses. They broke windows. I watched from the safety of a borrowed Honda Civic as strangers dismantled what used to be my life. And you know what I thought about the whole time? My mug. The one I was holding when the fire began. It had a cartoon sloth on it that said, "Nap all day." Somewhere in the middle of the chaos, I realized I'd dropped it. Maybe in the hallway. Maybe on the lawn. Either way, it was gone. Later, much later, When the embers cooled and someone handed me a form to fill out for emergency assistance, I checked the box that said displaced due to fire. There wasn't a box for emotionally microwaved, so I didn't bother to elaborate. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my car with my seatbelt still on, clutching my half-charged phone and a water bottle someone gave me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the fire again. Not just the flames, but the speed. Fire moves faster than fear. It doesn't care about your routines. It doesn't care what's sentimental. It just eats. That night, I also realized I had no idea what I'd insured. I couldn't remember the name of the company or how to access the documents. I couldn't remember my landlord's number. I couldn't even remember where my backup charger was, which was funny because I now had nothing left to charge. Oh, and here's a weird little tidbit in medieval times. People believed fire could purify the soul. That's why witches were burned. Because fire supposedly revealed truth. Let me tell you, if that was truth back there, I'd rather lie. By sunrise, all that was left was smoke and something that used to be a mailbox. I didn't cry. That came later. For now, I just felt empty, like the house. Charred walls, and too quiet. The next morning came like a slap sharp unwelcome and far too bright. Sunlight bounced off the fire truck's chrome, off the wet asphalt, off the shattered glass that used to be my front window. The fire was out, mostly. It left behind a skeleton, not a metaphor this time. The house looked like a rib cage cracked open by giant hands. Steam curled from the scorched walls. Everything dripped. I stood on the sidewalk, arms wrapped around myself, wearing a borrowed coat 2 sizes too big. Doreen's husband had fished it from their hallway closet, muttering something about being prepared for Canadian winters, which was funny because we were in Arizona. The fire chief gave me a clipboard, the kind with forms and blanks and acronyms no one wants to see before coffee. He spoke in a low voice like this was a funeral. Maybe it was. A cremation, anyway. We believe it started in the kitchen, he said, like I didn't already know that from the whole exploding stove situation. I nodded like someone in a toothpaste commercial. Smile, nod, accept the sample. Don't question the world ending behind your eyes. Fun fact. In 2019, researchers discovered a 10,000-year-old structure in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. Its circular stone pillars were built before writing, before farming, before logic, apparently. And some of them are charred signs of ancient fire. Historians still debate whether the flames were ritual accidental or the first instance of someone trying to cook toast. Back to my kitchen, or what was left of it. The stove was a melted carcass. The fridge had burst open and vomited out blackened plastic that used to be Tupperware. I spotted something white and weirdly pristine among the soot. It was the handle of a spatula, stainless steel, probably indestructible. Congratulations, kitchen gadgets, you survived. I didn't step into the house. Not yet. The structure wasn't declared safe. And honestly, I didn't want to breathe in the ghost of my IKEA bookshelves. I just stood there watching the smoke curl around the broken frame of the living room window and tried to remember how I got here. That's when it hit me, the moment. The click. The realization that I had no home. It's one thing to say, my house burned down. It's another thing entirely to understand that sentence while staring at your own toothbrush, melted into a puddle of ceramic in what used to be your bathroom sink. There's a reason people freeze up in disasters. Your brain doesn't compute. It throws up a blue screen and says, try again later. Mine just kept repeating the same useless questions. Where will I sleep? What do I tell work? Did I ever cancel that trial subscription to BritBox? Doreen brought me coffee. Real coffee. Not that powdered nonsense. She handed it to me like she was offering a sacred relic. I sipped it and let the heat bite my tongue. The pain felt real grounding. I lost everything I said out loud for the first time. Doreen didn't flinch. She just nodded. "We'll help you figure it out," she said. That phrase, "figure it out," was both comforting and laughable. Figure what out? How to rebuild my life with no furniture, no ID, no underwear. Sure. Just another Tuesday. Odd fact, in 1942, during the Coconut Grove nightclub fire in Boston, over 400 people died. One of the reasons it was so deadly, revolving doors. They jammed from the pressure of people trying to escape. Since then, fire codes in the U.S. mandate a minimum number of outward swinging exits in public spaces. Historians still debate whether that regulation would have saved lives had it come just months earlier. Anyway, Doreen offered me her spare room. I politely declined, because the thought of sleeping under a stranger's roof, even a nice one, felt suffocating. I ended up checking into a nearby motel, one of those places with beige walls and curtains that never quite close. My room smelled like soap and old carpet. I cried in the shower. Not loud, just enough to fog up the mirror with sadness. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain kept replaying the pop of the fire starting, the boom of the window exploding, the cold slap of air as I fled, over and over, like a trauma mixtape. At one point, I walked outside in my socks and stood under the motel's flickering sign. There were stars, so many stars. I hadn't noticed them in years. Maybe it was because I'd been too busy. Maybe it was because the fire burned away the light pollution. Or maybe it was just fate's weird way of saying, hey, not everything's ash. You ever notice how people try to comfort you with the weirdest things? At least you're alive. Things can be replaced. It could have been worse. Sure. But also, I really liked that couch. And no Karen. I wasn't attached to my blender, but it was a gift, and it worked better than any replacement ever will. It made smoothies so smooth, they were basically teleportation juice. The next morning, I went back. The house was roped off, but the fire marshal let me walk the edge. I found my sloth mug. It was cracked in half, but the words "nap all day" were still visible. I pocketed it, like some kind of war relic. Later, I took a picture of the house. Not to remember the damage, but to prove it happened, because already it didn't feel real. It felt like a dream someone else had, a cautionary tale from a safety seminar. As I walked away, I passed the mailbox. It had been blackened by smoke, but still stood upright, loyal, indifferent, waiting for letters that would never come. The days blurred. One blended into the next like smeared charcoal sketches in a notebook someone dropped in a puddle. I found myself checking the motel window more often than I checked my phone, which was saying something since my phone now served as my alarm entertainment, and let's be honest, my therapist. Mornings started with instant oatmeal and motel coffee that tasted like ambition's ashes. Nights ended with cold sheets and an unfamiliar ceiling. And somewhere between, I tried to figure out what it meant to be a person who had nothing. Doreen insisted on helping with paperwork, insurance forms, emergency aid, things that came with numbers and phone holds and unhelpful hotlines. The woman was a saint in yoga pants. She showed up with a manila folder labeled Operation Phoenix, and I swear, if I didn't love her, I would have filed a restraining order for being too competent. Fun historical fact. After the Great Fire of London in 1666, a significant chunk of the city was rebuilt in stone instead of wood. That fire consumed over 13,000 homes. Historians still debate whether the change was inspired by practicality or pure PTSD. Meanwhile, my own version of rebuilding meant replacing socks and learning how to accept pity meals without flinching. Did you know that strangers will Venmo you money if your tragedy is sad enough? One woman from high school who once tried to shove me into a locker sent $20 with a message that said, "Stay strong." I almost laughed myself into a breakdown. I needed ID, a toothbrush, a plan. But most of all, I needed to feel like me again. So I did the only thing I could think of. I visited the library. There's something about the smell of old books that reboots your soul. Musty quiet, full of forgotten voices whispering, "Hey, you're not the first wreck around here." I sat between the nonfiction stacks and stared at a book called Fires of the Mind. It wasn't about literal fire. It was a psychology book about trauma rebirth and cognitive dissonance. I didn't read it. I just held it for an hour like a talisman. Odd tidbit. In Japan, there's a practice called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, you highlight them. It's supposed to symbolize beauty in imperfection. Historians still debate whether the technique began from necessity or philosophy. That night, I dreamt of gold seams running through my charred house. The walls glittered like veins of molten metal. I walked barefoot through the wreckage, but nothing burned. It was warm, inviting, as if the fire hadn't destroyed it, had redesigned. I woke up crying. The motel staff got to know me, not by name, by situation. One guy called me Fire Lady and gave me extra shampoo bottles every morning. The front desk girl, Lisa, had lavender hair and a sleeve of tattoos that told a story I never had the nerve to ask about. She slid me a coupon for the diner next door and said, "Comfort food helps, but pie heals." So I sat in a sticky vinyl booth and ate cherry pie like it was holy. And in that moment, I understood why diners are sacred in American disaster movies. They're warm. They serve pancakes at midnight, and the waitresses call you hun, like they've always known you. I began writing things down. Not for therapy, not for anyone else. Just for me. Things like, "Today I didn't cry at the insurance office." Or, "Found a new favorite hoodie at the thrift store." Smells like lavender and mystery. These weren't victories. They were breadcrumbs, proof that I wasn't frozen in place. And then one afternoon, I went back to the ruins. They'd cleared out some debris. The frames still stood, like bones picked clean. I walked along the edge, careful not to step on nails or memories. That's when I saw it, a picture frame. Charred at the edges. The glass cracked, but the photo inside intact. It was me and my sister laughing at a Halloween party 5 years ago. I was dressed as a toaster. She was a piece of toast. Don't ask. I clutched it like a lifeline. Fireproof, apparently. Like some part of my joy refused to burn. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to rebuild the house. Not that house. Not those walls. I would find a new place. A blank slate. One where the air didn't smell like endings. One where my memories hadn't soaked into the carpet. Fun fact, in the 1950s, a woman named Helen Hoover moved into a burned-down cabin in the Minnesota wilderness and rebuilt it with her husband. She went on to write books about living off-grid and facing wolves. Historians still debate whether she was brave or slightly unhinged. I guess I was about to find out where I landed on that spectrum. The next day, I bought a notebook. Not a fancy one. Just lined paper and a sturdy spine. I titled the first page, "Things Fire Can't Burn." And then I wrote the first entry, me. You stop checking the calendar. Not because you're healing, but because each square starts to feel like an accusation. A reminder of how long it's been since your world burned down. People keep saying you're doing great. You nod, smile, even thank them. But inside, you're measuring progress in teaspoons, like I didn't cry when I passed the fire station, or I only stared at the house for 5 minutes today. Your therapist, yes, you caved and got one, suggests routine, familiarity, a little structure for your mental scaffolding. You resist, of course, because structure feels like pretending, and you're not in the mood to pretend. Instead, you walk, a lot, miles sometimes, through neighborhoods that don't know your name. You pass strangers laughing on porches and think they have no idea. You envy that bubble of safety, that soft illusion that nothing can go wrong at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. There's a bench near a duck pond where you find yourself sitting often. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes just with silence. One time, a little girl offers you a crayon drawing of the sun hugging the earth. You nearly lose it right there on the bench, but instead you thank her and tape it to your motel mirror. It becomes a weird little beacon proof that innocence still exists even after the ash. Historical fact. After the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, a cow named Mrs. O'Leary's was wrongly blamed for starting the blaze. Decades later, historians still debate whether that cow ever existed or if it was just a scapegoat. Apparently, even in catastrophe, people need something to blame. One afternoon, you try to make pancakes. It's a disaster. The motel kitchenette is more like a microwave with delusions of grandeur. The batter burns. The smoke alarm screams. You laugh so hard you start coughing. It's the first real laugh you've had since the fire, and it feels like taking off tight shoes after a long day. So you write it down. Burned pancakes. Didn't panic. That's growth, right? Odd tidbit. The ancient Romans believed that fire was both destructive and purifying. They had a goddess named Vesta, whose eternal flame symbolized hearth and home. Historians still debate whether her temple survived more due to divine favor or really good masonry. You decide to move forward, not move on. There's a difference. Moving on sounds like erasure. Moving forward means you carry it with you, but you still walk. You look at apartments, small ones, cheap ones, ones with leaky faucets and views of dumpsters. None feel right until one does. It's a third-floor unit with peeling paint and a window that sticks. But it has light. Real warm, late afternoon light that spills in like honey. You stand in the middle of the empty room and whisper, "Okay." The first night there, you sleep on the floor. No furniture yet. Just a borrowed blanket and a stubborn hope that tomorrow might suck slightly less. The morning sun wakes you up. You blink at the cracked ceiling, and for a second you forget what month it is. You smile anyway. You meet the neighbor next door, an older woman named Grace with 3 cats and an unhealthy relationship with crossword puzzles. She invites you in for tea. You go. She tells you her whole life story before the kettle even whistles. Historical footnote. In post-war London, people rebuilt entire blocks of homes in just months. Some historians still argue whether that speed was fueled by desperation, pride, or the sheer human refusal to stay broken. You unpack the single box you own. Inside one photo frame, a half-burned journal, a pair of shoes that somehow made it out clean. You set them on the windowsill like trophies, like proof. I was here. I survived. You call your sister. You say, "I think I'm okay." She cries anyway, says she's proud of you, tells you mom would have been too. That one hits you like a brick to the chest, but you don't flinch. You write it down, said it out loud. Okay, maybe meant it a little. You hang up the crayon sun on your new fridge. It's not much, but it's yours. The city smells different after a fire. Not just the air, though, that too. It's something deeper. Like even the concrete absorbed the smoke and decided not to let go. You walk through your old neighborhood with cautious steps, unsure of what you'll feel or what might remain. Nothing is as it was, and yet everything is exactly where you left it. Only now, it's burned, charred, taped off, and eerily silent. The mailbox is still there, a little warped from heat but standing. It looks like it's trying to hold itself together too. They've cordoned off the entire block. Caution tape flutters in the wind like desperate flags. You recognize neighbors you haven't seen in weeks. Some are staring at their homes like they're ghosts. Some are crying. A few are yelling. You just stand still. One man a few doors down is talking to a news crew. He's animated, trying to turn tragedy into a soundbite. You quietly back away. You're not ready to be a headline. Historical moment. After the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, and fire photographers sold charred bricks as souvenirs. Capitalism is undefeated. Historians still debate whether those bricks were even from the actual fires or just random rubble from opportunistic vendors. A city official asks you if you want to walk the property. The phrasing stings. Property, not home. Like it's already been downgraded to a plot of data in some insurance system. You walk anyway. What's left is barely there. A blackened frame, the suggestion of a stairwell, the broken ribs of what used to be your kitchen. You think you spot the tile from your bathroom. It's half buried in ash. You crouch down, touch it, then pull your hand back. It's still warm. Quirky fact. Some seeds only sprout after being exposed to fire. They're called pyrophytic. Nature apparently thrives on drama. A woman nearby is shouting into her phone. Insurance, probably. You hear her say, "It's not about the money, it's the memories." You nod, even though she can't see you. It's always about the memories. Your house wasn't perfect. The roof leaked. The fridge made strange noises, but it was yours. And now it's not. That reality doesn't hit like a hammer. It creeps in slowly, like fog rolling under the door. Someone asks if you need water. You say no, even though your throat is parched. Pride is stubborn like that. You walk past your old bedroom window. Well, what used to be your window? It's just an empty square now. You picture your bed, your bookshelf, the plant you always forgot to water. You wonder if the roots are still there in the soil. You wonder if they might grow again. Academic debate. Scholars still argue whether trauma fundamentally rewires your brain or just reshuffles the pieces. You feel different, not broken, just rearranged. You stay longer than you mean to. A crow lands on a nearby beam and caws at you like it's scolding your grief. You offer a weak smile and mutter, yeah, I know." You pick up a small rock from the ground, something solid, something untouched, and slide it into your pocket. You tell yourself it's just a rock. But it's not. It's weight. It's history. It's a reminder. Someone behind you sneezes. The ash kicks up again. You finally leave. That night, you dream about the fire, but this time it moves in reverse. The flames shrink back into the walls. The smoke rewinds into the outlets. Your house reassembles itself piece by piece like a film played backward. You wake up just as your old front door closes behind you. You lie in the dark for a long time. Then you reach over, turn on the lamp, and write it down. I went back. It didn't kill me. In the morning, you look at the crayon sun still taped to your fridge. It looks a little brighter. Loss doesn't arrive all at once. It leaks in. It drips from the corners of your day like a slow, relentless faucet. In the beginning, people think what you've lost is material. Your couch, your wardrobe, maybe the television mounted on the wall. They imagine flames eating up your things like some greedy monster, and they send sympathies for the furniture. But what you really lose in a fire are the things you can never repurchase. A paper snowflake, made in third grade, still stuck between the pages of an old recipe book. The only photo where your father looked genuinely happy. The playlist written in Sharpie on the back of a CD. A shoebox full of awkward love letters and bus stubs and grocery receipts you swore you'd use for budgeting one day. You try to make a list for insurance, but what category does nostalgia fall under? Historical fact. After the Library of Alexandria burned, entire schools of thought vanished. Gone. Just ashes and silence. Historians still debate whether it was destroyed by Julius Caesar, Christian zealots, or simply neglect. But the result was the same: an entire civilization's memory, up in smoke. Your list grows, not in value, but in emotion. You remember the burnt orange sweater that never fit quite right, but you wore every October anyway. The mismatched mugs, the scar on your coffee table you lied about to guests but secretly loved. One line reads, "Blue Bowl Grandma's hands." That's how you remember it. Not the object, the connection, the story, the ghost of someone's touch. You sit in the temporary shelter laptop, balanced on a shaky fold-out table, trying to describe your loss in bullet points. There's something wildly ironic about grief being formatted in Helvetica 12-point font. A woman next to you argues over the value of a microwave. You look at your form and hesitate before typing plants. That's it, just plants. They were alive once, after all. Weird fact. There's a fungus called Pyronema omphalides that actually thrives in post-fire soil. It only shows up after a burn, like some spore-based phoenix. Nature is weirdly poetic that way. You visit the remains again, not to find anything, but to say something. You don't even know what yet. Maybe thank you. Maybe I'm sorry. You spot your old front step, scorched, but still shaped like itself. You sit down. It feels wrong and right all at once. A dog walks past with its owner. The dog sniffs near your feet. You scratch its ears. It wags, then trots off. You whisper goodbye, though you're not sure if it's for the dog or the house. You keep walking. You see other people sifting through their memories too. One woman finds a ceramic angel and clutches it like a child's hand. A man discovers a mostly intact mirror. He looks at his reflection like it belongs to someone else. There's comfort in that shared silence, in the collective pause between what was and what will be. Scholars still argue whether collective trauma strengthens or fragments communities. Standing there among strangers, you feel a strange camaraderie, like you're all members of a club no one applied to join. You pass a small pile of charred books. One of them has curled pages that almost form a heart. You take a photo. It feels like a tribute. Later, you visit the public records office. You need new copies of everything: license ID, title, insurance, tax documents. A woman at the counter asks for your name. You give it, and she types it like it's just another case file. You wonder if she can hear your house burning beneath each syllable. You walk out with a manila envelope. It feels thin, not heavy enough to represent everything you've been through. You stare at the envelope, and then on impulse, you write "beginning" across it in thick black marker. Because maybe that's what this is. Not a replacement, not a recovery, but the very first page of whatever comes next. The shelter is cold. Not in a cruel way, just in a linoleum fluorescent municipal kind of way. It smells like disinfectant and faint soup. You find yourself recognizing coughs in the distance, the way you'd recognize neighbors' cars back home. You'd think survival would be louder, but sometimes it sounds like the slow scrape of plastic chairs on tile. That's where you meet her, the woman in the mask. She's not a doctor or counselor. She doesn't ask questions or offer pity. She's just another displaced human, sitting cross-legged by the vending machine drinking tea from a ceramic mug she somehow salvaged. It has a tiny chip near the handle. She runs her finger over it while you talk. You sit near her because she has calm energy, like a warm battery. She reminds you that you used to have rituals: morning tea, evening podcasts, plants watered on Sundays. Small things that meant something when the world still had its edges. She teaches you to breathe again. You tell her about the shallow panic breaths you didn't even know you were taking. She nods, inhales slowly, holds, exhales, again. You do it together. It doesn't cure you, but it makes the room feel less hungry. Weird fact: in Japan, after disasters, people sleep in gymnasiums under government-issued silver blankets. They're called dragonfly wings because of how they shimmer in the dark. Entire cities breathe together under thin layers of warmth. You tell her you've never felt smaller. She smiles and replies, "That's when we remember we're part of something." She says her name is Mira, but she tells you not to get attached. You don't ask why. She gives you a notebook and tells you to start writing what you remember, not just the loss, but the good. Write the smells. Write what your cat used to do when she was mad. Write how your front door squeaked like a duck with asthma. You laugh, and it surprises you. Historical footnote: after the Great Fire of London in 1666, people believed rebuilding should come with reinvention. New architecture, new rules, new life. Historians still debate whether that reconstruction gave rise to modern London or buried something irreplaceable. You and Mira walk to a nearby park, the one still partly untouched by fire. Grass grows in confused, half-burnt patches. Some trees made it. Others lean like ghosts. She shows you how to tell time by the sun again. You didn't think you'd need to relearn things like that, but you do. One afternoon, she gives you a mask. A cloth one, hand-sewn, patterned with tiny birds. Sometimes she says healing starts with pretending you're already okay. You wear it not because of smoke, but because it feels like armor. Together, you help organize the shelter library. Most of the books are old romances and manuals on electrical wiring. You find a battered copy of The Little Prince. Mira says it's a survival manual disguised as a children's book. She's not wrong. Each night, you write something in your notebook. One line, maybe two. Sometimes it's just breathe better. Other times, it's full paragraphs about a birthday cake you once made that collapsed like a deflated balloon. On a Thursday, Mira leaves. No goodbye. Just a folded paper on your pillow. It says, "Air clears, hearts remember, you'll be okay." You keep the note tucked into your notebook. Every time you think the smoke inside you is returning, you read it again. Scholars still debate whether shared trauma bonds people for life or just briefly interrupts their loneliness. But you know this for a short time. Someone reminded you that you are more than what the fire spared. The vending machine hums a little softer now. Maybe that's just your imagination, but the breath, that's real. And it comes easier. Now. Rebuilding starts when the smoke finally stops clinging to your clothes. Not because the fire forgot you, but because your body stops needing to prove it survived. That's when people start handing you papers. Forms, grants, emergency aid, more forms, more lines, more waiting. It's like a second disaster made of bureaucracy instead of flames. You're offered money to return to what you had. Insurance assistance, even a very formal man in a button-down shirt who says restoration like it's a magic spell. But something inside you hesitates. You stand on the plot where your house used to be, and instead of picturing blueprints, you picture silence. Not grief, just quiet. And the word that forms isn't rebuild, it's reimagine. Odd fact. In post-war Poland, when Warsaw was destroyed, architects debated whether to rebuild it exactly as it had been or start over entirely. They ended up doing both, restoring facades while inserting modern plumbing and electricity behind them. Historians still debate whether that made it more authentic or less. You stare at your old mailbox, scorched but still upright. You remember how many passive-aggressive notes it held from neighbors about your dog's barking. You remember the packages you forgot to pick up, the catalogs you never ordered. What if you didn't rebuild that? What if you didn't need the same 4-bedroom box with the chipped tile in the hallway and the leaky faucet that sounded like a ticking clock? You sit on the foundation slab, still warm from the sun. The wind smells like nothing now. Not smoke, not ash, just air. You think of Mira's paper mask with the birds. You think of the notebook you filled with tiny moments like stringing beads on a necklace. The new version of your home starts with a porch swing. You don't even draw walls around it at first. Just a place to sit, a place to breathe. People call to ask if you want to reclaim your stuff from the temporary storage facility. You say no. Let it go. Let someone else find a new story in the half-scorched toaster or the barely worn boots. You buy seeds instead. Tomatoes, basil, sunflowers. You dig with your hands, not a shovel. It feels like asking permission from the earth itself. Strange fact. In Iceland, before building anything, many people still consult maps of elf territories, invisible spaces said to belong to hidden folk. Construction is halted or altered to avoid offending them. Superstition, maybe. But you find comfort in the idea of respecting what you cannot see. You start building without blueprints, a single room, a hammock, no television, but plenty of windows. When people ask, why no bedroom? You say, I sleep where the moonlight fits. They think you're joking. Maybe you are. You've kept one thing from the old house, a wooden spoon. It's warped and cracked, but it reminds you of meals, of warmth, of stirring soups on rainy days. You don't use it. You just hang it by the door. The birds return first. Then the butterflies. Then a neighbor curious. Then another. They bring coffee in silence. You like both. Scholars still debate whether trauma makes us want to recreate what we lost or escape it entirely. You've decided your trauma doesn't get to choose for you. One afternoon, you walk to the river. You take off your shoes. You step into the current. It's freezing, shocking. But it reminds you that you're not made of ash. You're still electric. And you think, this is my blueprint now. Not walls, but movement. Not rooms, but rituals. Not restoration. Something better. The day the air clears completely, you don't even notice it at first. It just happens slowly, like the background hum of survival, fading into actual silence. There's no ceremony, no trumpet sound announcing congratulations you made it. There's just a moment when you step outside, and for the first time, the sky doesn't look like a memory, it looks real. It's absurd how suspicious you are of blue skies now. You keep looking for smoke that isn't there. It's like your eyes have been rewired to anticipate danger. A bird takes off too fast, and your heart skips. A neighbor burns leaves down the road, and you nearly collapse. You tell yourself it's just your body learning how to exist without threat. But it feels like you're not quite done being burned. Interesting fact. After Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, burying Pompeii under ash, survivors in nearby towns kept their windows closed for years, even during the summer, believing poisonous air still lingered. Historians still debate whether this was a cultural trauma or a rational response to unknown science. You get it now. You understand how fear seeps into habit. Still, you keep opening windows, one creak at a time. You sit in your one-room house and try to write a grocery list. You get as far as milk before staring at the paper for an hour. It's not that you're sad, you just don't remember what your favorite cereal was. You've been eating canned beans and donated granola bars for months. You put down the pen. You walk to the garden instead. The tomatoes are tiny green marbles right now. The basil smells like summer. There's a spider building, something elaborate between the sunflowers. You let her be. A friend calls and says, "You sound like yourself again." You don't know what that means. You were never really sure who yourself was. You laugh and say, "Cool, let me know when she shows up." She doesn't laugh. She says, "You're funny. You've always been funny." And that stops you, because funny was never a word you used for yourself. But maybe you're funny now. Maybe you've made room for humor again. That's something. At night, you light a candle, not because the power's out, but because the glow feels softer than the bulb. You hum a song you don't remember learning. And when the wind brushes through the cracks in the wall, you don't flinch. You listen. It doesn't whisper fire anymore. It just sounds like air. Scholars still debate the difference between healing and forgetting. You think healing is what happens when the forgetting isn't required. You still remember the scream of your roof giving way. You still remember the smell of melting plastic, the way your feet tore open on gravel as you ran. But those memories don't sit on your chest like a boulder now. They live somewhere else, like an old radio station you can still tune into, but don't have to. You make tea. You drink it outside. You tell the clouds I made it. And this time, they don't answer with rain. There's a moment when you realize you're no longer trying to rebuild the same house. Not literally, of course. The insurance payout wasn't even close to what they promised. But even metaphorically, you stopped trying to rebuild the life you had. Because that version of you didn't survive the fire, you did. The difference matters. The old house had curtains you hated, but never changed. A dining table nobody ate at. A mailbox that never received anything but bills and catalogs. The old you made it work. The new you wonders why. So you fill your new space with only things you love. It's small. It leans slightly to the left. One of the windows sticks. But it breathes. It laughs with you when the kettle whistles. It hums at night when the fan turns. It feels alive. You don't hoard things now. You keep what fits in the space of a single sigh. If it can't be described in one breath, it doesn't stay. Odd historical footnote. Early 20th century American transcendentalists believed possessions dulled the spirit. They wrote essays about owning only what could be carried during a long walk. Historians still debate whether this was idealism or a subtle protest against industrial life. You think they were onto something. The fire stripped you bare. At first, that felt like a robbery. Now, it feels like a rare gift. Like the universe said, here's the hardest possible way to realize you didn't need any of that. And maybe you didn't. What you did need your voice, your memory, your stubborn will to live. You kept. You're sitting on your porch when a child bikes past and yells, "Hi." You wave. He yells again. You're the fire lady, right? You raise an eyebrow. That's one way to say it. He smiles. My mom says you're a hero. You smile back. Your mom's being kind. He laughs. She says you fought the fire like a dragon. You laugh harder than you've laughed in months. He zooms off, leaving only dust and joy behind him. And for once, the label doesn't sting. Maybe you were a dragon. Maybe you breathed enough fear and flame to earn the title. Or maybe you were just someone who refused to burn. Either way, here you are. In a home you built with scars you don't hide and days that no longer feel like battles. You read again. You plant seeds. You write things down just because you feel like it. And when you smell smoke from someone else's chimney, you don't run, you breathe. The past visits sometimes. But it's a guest now, not a trespasser. You give it tea. You say, I'm still here, and it nods and leaves quietly. That's the thing. No one tells you about survival. It doesn't mean becoming who you were. It means honoring who you are now. Even if that person has ashes in her hair and soot in her lungs, even if her laugh sounds different, even if her dreams burn brighter, because in the end, the woman who escaped the fire didn't run. She transformed. The air is soft now. The night no longer bites. You walk barefoot on cool wood floors, each step reminding you that this is real. This is yours. This is now. There's no rush anymore. You've outrun the worst of it. You've buried what needed burying. And what remains this quiet, this resilience, this unshakable core, it belongs to you. You pour yourself a glass of water and marvel at the sound. The simple echo of normal things. Outside, wind rustles the leaves like a lullaby. You think of all the versions of you that once lived in the dark. The girl who froze at every siren. The woman who didn't believe she'd ever sleep again. The soul who thought survival meant silence. They're still here somewhere inside you, but they're not in charge anymore. You speak kindly to them. You say, thank you for carrying me. And then you walk forward into a room lit by warmth. You don't need to narrate your pain anymore. You don't need to justify your joy. You've earned both. And if someone ever asks what it felt like to survive fire, you'll smile and say, it felt like remembering how to breathe. And you'll mean it.